Hey there, it's Naomi Karth with part two of using essential oils to help support healthy emotions. And this is going to be where I talk more about what we used with our oils and everything. So, with Sam, I already mentioned that Joy is his oil. And we've actually, as a family, found that this is kind of Joy is kind of like our theme for this year anyway. But this oil is an oil that we don't just use daily, we use 10 times a day. We actually put it in a roller and dilute it, 10 drops in a 10 ml roller, fill the rest up with the carrier oil. And then what we do is we like to apply it over our heart and then kind of press down. We do that to Jerome as well. Sometimes we'll add it, like put it on our wrists or on our toes too. And Joy has an amazing, like, floral scent. At first, when I smelled it, I didn't particularly care for it. It actually took me a long time to find that I like it. Now it's one of my favorite oils. And I feel that probably the reason that I didn't like it when I first smelled it was because I needed it, and like my brain knew that, and I wanted to stay grouchy. So when Sam first started using Joy, he was just using it aromatically, and I had actually been praying, like almost begging God to give me my husband back. Life was not the same. He was like a shell of who I'd married, and it was just devastating. And I actually prayed the words, Lord, I want him to have joy in his life again. And Sam wears a couple of bands. Anybody who's ever seen a picture of him has probably noticed that he has two Mud Love bands. One says Joy and one says Live on them. And they have purple and orange bands because those were his sister's favorite colors. And one day, shortly after I had started praying specifically for Joy, I noticed that he was doing this and sniffing his bands, which have like a woven string on them. And I asked him what he was doing. And he said, I'm smelling Joy. I put it on my Mud Love bands. And I said, how long have you been doing that? And he said, about 2 weeks, which was when I had started praying about it. And I noticed that it was like a slow awakening. It was like he realized that he needed to continue living. And it's not something that you can tell someone who's grieving. You can't force someone to start dealing with their grief, and learning to live a life without somebody that they're absolutely devastated to be missing. There's a decision that they have to make on their own, and he did. He made that decision to continue living. I mean, usually when grief strikes a couple like that, like what we've been through, they either stay together or they don't. And the reason they don't stay together is usually because one of the spouses just can't overcome everything. And that was my fear, was that he wouldn't be able to overcome everything he'd been through. But after several months, he used Joy and he used Thieves daily. After several months, there was an incredible difference. He was able to enjoy himself, and we reached a point where we could live again. And there are many, many oils that you could use in these circumstances, but I feel like Joy really makes the most sense when you're dealing with grief, when you're ready to start dealing with the grief you have in your heart. I don't know that it's necessarily an oil that you would want to be applying when you go to a funeral. You might, but I feel like it's more for the aftermath of dealing with grief. So that's the oil that he used. And then the oils that I started with, I already mentioned Stress Away, which we use religiously. And then in Gentle Babies, Deborah Rayburn talks about trauma life for a mother who's been through a traumatic birth. And so we were really blessed that we have an Aroma Complete kit that we won. And when I saw Trauma Life, I went to my kit thinking, I think that might be in there. And it was. And I feel like we're so blessed to have that, because I smelled this oil and I knew I needed it. And so what I did was I actually diffused it. And as long as I was in the room where it was diffusing, I was okay. And I don't know how to tell you, but as soon as the diffuser would switch off, I knew that I needed more. And so I moved on to applying it topically. felt like it was more effective to have it in my body at a certain point. But it's an expensive oil, but it's worth every penny. The other oil that I found to be really helpful was actually Hope. And I was putting it on just saying that I hope one day I can get over this. It wasn't like I have hope. It was more like I hope to hope. I hope I have hope someday. I also used a couple of single oils. Incidentally, these are actually the oils we use to start labor. But clary sage and jasmine, they both smell wonderful. And I started using those daily along with Progestins Plus. At first I was using them weekly, just so that I could tell Sam, yes, I was oiling, as a sort of technicality there. But then I started using them more faithfully. And honestly, it wasn't until about 8 months out that I realized like I was really ready to start healing. So you have to give yourself time to be prepared for that. But I knew I wanted to heal. There's been a lot of studies done, mind-body connection and how our emotions affect our physical bodies and things. But one thing they know for sure is that you store emotions inside of you, you will eventually get sick. And I've been sick before. I've been very sick, and I don't want to go down that road again. So I knew that I wanted to deal with it. So we decided to get a little more serious about it. So my husband bought a book for me. It's actually printed through Australia, so it's a little more expensive to get, but it's literally called How to Heal a Bad Birth. And I struggled with the title for a while because I wasn't sure I wanted to call my birth a bad birth, because it was the best day of my life, but it was also the worst day of my life. Other than my wedding, which was just the best day. There wasn't anything bad really that happened that day. It was such a conflicting moment. I was becoming a mom, yet I couldn't celebrate being a mom, and I wasn't even awake. And, people couldn't visit and celebrate with us in the hospital. And, it was such a weird experience, and very conflicting, because I'm thrilled to be a mom and I'm so blessed to have my son and that we're both healthy. But at the same time, there's just this horrible part of everything that I went through that just is in the back of your mind replaying over and over again. So if that's you, you're not alone. But also, like I said, there is a lot of hope. So my husband bought that book for me. And it actually has a game plan that helps you start to process things. And some of it's internal, some of it is physical, like literally writing down, like I'm angry at this nurse for these things. I appreciate my doula because she did these things, and just working through that, not just working through the bad emotions. In my case, I worked through the good ones as well. And that was an incredible tool. And then the next thing that happened was, I have a friend who was dealing with some emotions on Facebook who posted about this book. This is called Releasing Emotional Patterns with Essential Oils. It's by Carolyn Mean. She's a chiropractor. And one of the reasons that I chose to go with this book over all the other books that they have is it's specific to Young Living. And I mean, we're all about Young Living because they're the highest quality oils you can get. They have the seed to seal standard, which no other company has, and they have quality control over every single farm that they own, and no other company even owns any of their farms. So I wanted that sort of specific pattern, but using this book, which I'm going to talk about this book in the next segment, I was able to identify some emotions that I wanted to work on. Honestly, the hardest part was picking which emotions I wanted to work with, but she has all of the oils listed and the different emotions that they help with. And so in the end, I ended up picking 3 because I didn't want to get overwhelmed and not do anything. Some people would want to be very specific and follow that book to the letter, and I wanted to make it as easy as possible because I am a first-time mom, I am breastfeeding, and I'm trying to run a business from home, and I'm trying to deal with all this emotional stuff, and the last thing I want to do is make it harder to do that. So I picked 3 oils. And then I put them in rollers, and I actually diluted them because one of them was peppermint, and peppermint can potentially cause your supply to dip when you're nursing. It actually doesn't for me, but I wanted to just be cautious about that. So those were my oils. And then in the book, she specifically goes through the oil and the emotion that it targets. And then she has a process where you apply that oil to a specific area of your body. And then there's a phrase that you speak, affirming, first you let go of the bad emotion, and then you affirm the emotion that you want to replace it. And so to make it easy, I just would roll it on that area. And then it reached a point where I didn't have time to even roll it on a specific area of my body. And so I would just roll it on my wrists, and I would smell it, and I would just think the positive emotion that I wanted to replace the negative one. This method is extremely effective. It may have been more effective if I had followed the book to the T, but like I said, I didn't want to make it too complicated. So this is the end of this section 2, and in the next one I'm going to actually just go a little more specific with the book and explain a little bit about it, and then I'm also just going to talk about a couple of options that Young Living has to get you started. If you are more of the I want to get a kit, or I just want to buy one oil, give you some tips on some things that you might want to try. Obviously Joy, Stress Away are two that I highly recommend as starter oils for pretty much any situation.